Hi, I'm Susie Garden, and this is the Ageless and Awesome podcast. I'm an age-defying naturopath and clinical nutritionist, and I'm here to bust myths around women's health and aging so that you can be ageless and awesome in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The Ageless and Awesome podcast is dedicated to helping women through perimenopause and menopause with great health, a positive mindset, and outrageous confidence. Hit subscribe or follow now, and let's get started. Today, I'm really happy to have a special guest. Today's guest is Jenny de Lacy. After a 20-plus year career in corporate learning and development, achieving a master's in professional education and training, and working with some of Australia's largest corporates, Jenny left her lucrative contracting career to focus on raising her sons solo in 2014. She now has her own business as a content marketing consultant and trainer. She works with clients to achieve powerful message clarity that aligns their business goals to the humans they want to influence online to help them connect with more ideal clients. She's been a solo parent now for 13 years. She's raised her sons and they still have challenges together. And she's also navigated menopause and ADHD in one fell swoop. Jenny's had an interesting health journey in her 40s, which she's going to share with us today. And she wants other women like herself who've always known they have incredible potential to be able to achieve what they want from their business and life, regardless of the difficulties of solo parenting, menopause, and a late ADHD diagnosis. For her, it's been a life-changing past 12 months. Jenny, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Susie. Gosh, that's a long intro.
I know, it is, right? But that's often the case for women like us that have been around for a little while, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot to say when you get to 55. You're like, God, how do I make that shorter? I don't know if I can.
I know
Sure
exactly. I know exactly, yeah. So the way I start podcasts, I ask all of my guests to give a little bit of a brief overview of your journey to get of how you've gotten to where you are now and made the choices that you've made. So I'll hand it over to you.
That's a really good question. So part of it was in the intro, really, that when I had my now 23-year-old in 1999, I'd worked in corporate, pretty much since second year uni because I didn't like full-time uni. I found it tedious. So I wanted to work and be doing stuff and training people and learning and vibrant and earning money and, having a life. So when I found myself at home with a baby and not working, that was quite a culture shock for me because I think I'd played to my strengths until that point in my life. I'd already been doing something that was amazing and really suited me.
Yeah.
And then suddenly here I was in the land of tedium. And so I started a business then and started contracting back to learning and development organisations and RTOs and so forth. And it wasn't until I got divorced in 2010, but then in 2014 realised that, honestly, you got to raise the boys just needed too much from me and I couldn't work those sorts of hours anymore. And I think that was probably the first time I realised what burnout actually felt like, because I think I took to my bed, as I call it, for about 3 months in 2014, and I've done that again since. I did it in about 2018 too. So all of these sort of instances and unwellness, and I had a hysterectomy and and there was a whole heap of hormonal issues. By the time I realised I'd actually maybe even gone through menopause, I took way too long to get to that point. And misdiagnosed with postnatal depression, all those sorts of things that finally when the penny drops and you're like, God, I wish I'd known this before. I wish I'd gone and seen my specialist earlier. I wish blah, 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 blah. So now I'm sort of here and I've got a great deal more understanding of all those things add up to some pretty awesome experience to share with other people. But it's also meant that I've been able to pick the right business model, I guess, for me as well, and focus on my health a lot more in the last couple of years than I had done before.
Yeah, and it's so
So,
important. I think that's something a lot of women don't really do, is put themselves first. I find that a lot with the clients that I see, is that it's all about the family, the workplace, and they're the last person to really get their own care and support and attention. So I love that you've kind of really done that and been able to carve out a business that works well for you and your family life. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's good.
So let's get into some of your story. So let's start off with discussing, or you telling me, your experience with perimenopause and menopause in regard to parenting. I think that would be something that my listeners would really love to hear.
I just so feel for the women who are still in the thick of it with really small kids.
Yeah.
Like, we put so much pressure on ourselves. I remember meeting this primary school aged mum, from when my kids were in primary, when my kids were in primary school. And so Hunter would have been in grade 3. So that means he was about 8. And so that means I had a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old as well. And I was doing my master's, and I was trying to contract. And I remember her saying to me that she couldn't believe what Australian mums do to themselves. And I didn't really understand what she meant, but she was saying from a European perspective, you've got 3 kids to raise, and so you've got to look after yourself and the kids. Like, that's kind of why are you doing all those other things, right? Whereas for me, I think I wanted to use my brains and my skills, and, you know, being a mum is actually not enough for a lot of really smart, driven women. We want to achieve a lot more. So when I think by the time I got to that watershed moment in 2014, and I just had nothing left.
Yeah.
Like nothing left. And so luckily I'd earned good money in contracting, because I basically did stuff all for 3 months and took to my bed because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't realize that was perimenopause, or probably I had already been in menopause before that, because I'd never really experienced, I'd had postnatal, or certainly had been diagnosed with postnatal depression, but I don't think I'd seen the impact on me to actually have to reduce my expectations of what I could achieve in a day. Did they go to school? Have they been fed? You know, did I have a shower? And lots of times I was like, no, can't even do that. But at least they're fed and they've gone to school, and now I'm just going to, you know, try and journal or something, just try and work out what on earth I wanted to do next. Yeah. And I reckon that took about 3 months. And then I think when it really hit the peak of, I'd had a blood test, but I remember the GP at the time saying that it was depression or something. Right. And I was like, and so this was probably 2017 by then. And it wasn't until probably 2018 or even 2019, I'm embarrassed to say, that I finally said, this is absolutely ridiculous. You feel revolting all the time.
Yeah.
Go back and see him. And I found my old GP, who I adored, and I'd kind of lost him because he disappeared for a minute, and then I went back and found him. And he said, you poor bugger, no wonder you're feeling so hideous. And it was then that I realised what an impact it had, because, again, I had that sort of burnout feeling in 2018 that I swear I am still paying financially for that, not being able to work at that time and having to focus on the kids again, or at least focus on the kids kind of vibe, rather than being able to build a vibrant business or whatever. I was just treading water and sort of surviving. Now, I think that's not an uncommon story, but nobody would have known, because I definitely wouldn't have said anything to anyone at the time, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think now getting back into, you know, I'm medicated properly, and I've got, you know, I feel so much better. My clarity of focus and thoughts are better. Like, my kids are completely different. So that definitely affects them when you're feeling terrible, and we might not realise it. But I think for me it was getting back to the bare basics. What really needs to happen as a mum versus what's my, you know, vision for being the perfect mum. Well, I couldn't get to that. So I just had to let go of some of those expectations and just try and be and enjoy moments or create better moments for them that they remembered without just bashing myself up all the time for feeling so beastly. And like I'm really glad that I did go back to the GP finally and really get to the bottom of what was going on hormonally.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes you do need to find that GP that's actually going to listen as well. And if you're not satisfied with the response that you're getting from the GP in front of you, talk to another one. Because they have different levels.
We've got to be our
own
advocates, right?
You totally do. Totally do. And I find that a lot as a healthcare professional myself, because I do have a level of knowledge. I'm not a GP, obviously, but I do have a level of knowledge in a specific space. And I find this quite interesting, as often I do need to challenge my GP about certain things. If you are getting a little bit brushed off, well, that's normal for a woman of your age or whatever. It's like, well, that might be the case, but what if it's not? And, let's do a little bit more investigating and make sure that we are actually looking at the right thing here. You mentioned in the discussions we've had about that you had a late ADHD diagnosis. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it just seems to me at the moment, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm hearing this a lot right now, that there are so many adults getting diagnosed with ADHD. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with that? And was there a little bit of confusion around perimenopause and ADHD?
That's a very good point, because we all know that the clinical research with women as the subjects is glaringly missing deficient. In lots and lots and lots of, so for women with, for girls and young women and women with ADHD, there is research, but there's not a lot. But what I did was I found out through an endocrinologist and a scientist and a couple of other, people that write proper research papers about this, that the instance of symptoms of ADHD in girls and women is very linked to our hormones. And I think probably it's estrogen, but I can't remember. Don't quote me, because I don't know, because I don't need to know, actually.
Exactly.
That's my
you
version.
Don't need to know.
Just get on with it. But that's why lots of diagnosis happens in puberty, after childbirth, and in perimenopause. And so the anecdotal evidence is that many women are misdiagnosed as having postnatal depression, when in fact it may in fact be a symptom of ADHD or combined with, right? Yeah. So I can tell that my life was completely different pre-kids and after kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's because I got to play to my strengths. However my non-linear version of doing things and creating things and being, I was able to talk for a living pretty much until I had kids. So then after kids, that didn't work, and it was pretty excruciating. Fast forward to 2020, and we're home all the time, lack of stimulation, lack of connection, catching up with other people, being physically present with other people.
Particularly because you were in Melbourne, an impact.
Right? Yeah, that's right. And I found at the time that because I went and got a job, an actual employed by someone else job, which I hadn't done forever, because I thought I probably need to do it. And what I found was the biggest symptom for me that has a huge impact in my life every day is time blindness. Now, I hadn't really been aware of it before, because I knew I could go a whole day and do nothing and then realise how much I was supposed to actually have done and It felt like I had nothing to do. Like that's a really common experience for me. But when I looked at I had to track my time and how distressing that was for me, I was like, this isn't actually normal. And the other symptom I had was anxiety that I had never really experienced before. And we'd said, the GP had said, that's menopause. That's how you're being affected by menopause. Well, I was like, I've never felt this disgusting ever. And eventually I was going back to that self-advocacy. I remember being very, very nervous to say to my GP, I think I might have ADHD and I want to know.
Yeah.
I want you to help me work out how to know, because of all these other symptoms I experienced that match.
Yeah.
And it's not a question of do you lose your keys? It's what impact does it have in your life that you lose things all the time? You're not earning enough money. You're not remembering to get the right things done. You're not paying your bills. You're not, so there's a life impact financially, emotionally, etc. I was really nervous to bring this up with him, and I was so nervous that I sort of put it off. And then I thought, you know what? Has he ever been an asshole to me before?
Yeah.
No. He's always been really nurturing and fabulous. And so I went and said it, and he said, well, I can't refer you to the psychiatrist because they're too busy.
Yeah.
And I said, I still want to know. So I went to a clinical psychologist who are also qualified to do the assessment. And then eventually I found a psychiatrist in the middle of last year. So actually it's probably a year. I reckon I saw Dr. Cook in May 2022. So at the age of 54, and the assessment takes 3 sessions or whatever. It's pretty onerous.
Yeah.
But that was a tick. Yes, you do. And so I was really pleased that I got to that, because I now have the right medication and I feel like a completely different person, still with the same strengths, but the the impact of the hormones that I was having before, I just don't feel that at all. Thank God,
Yeah.
And I just think I'm not on my own there, that there are some significant impacts of how that, not just the symptom of the hormones, but if it's coupled with that diagnosis going on undiagnosed, that it does make women feel particularly horrible, and it has impacts on, do I even want to be here anymore? I know that's happened quite commonly for women my age.
Yes.
And I think, okay, well, now that I know, thank God for that.
Yeah.
But could I have done anything differently? So I don't go back and think about that too hard, because there's nothing I can do about it. Exactly. But I do know now that hormonal health has a big impact on the symptom severity. So there is at least that knowledge of, see the right specialist and go and hang out, get the right foods on board and all that sort of stuff. Like your listeners will already know that, because they're across this sort of thing. But for me, it was sort of a bit new.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, when women are in their 40s and 50s, there's so much going on. There's still raising kids. There's often people are at the peak of their career. Often there's aging parents as well, which is on your mind. And so, there's so much going on. So if you are getting a little bit of memory loss or brain fog or that kind of thing, you can kind of go, oh, well, it's just because I've got so much going on. I'm so busy, I'm forgetting stuff. And I find this a lot with women that I speak to in clinic, is they don't really even consider that actually there's something that can be done about that. And that maybe there is something else going on. Yes, it could be perimenopause, but yes, it could be ADHD, which I don't know how broadly known that is in the general population at the moment. And I don't know whether it's just because I'm a practitioner, I've been to a number of seminars about it, and I'm hearing so much about the increase in diagnosis later in life. But I think people aren't really thinking that this could be the problem that's causing, and that there can be something done about it. Because as you mentioned, it's so difficult to get a diagnosis, because at the moment the mental health professionals are fully booked. It's really hard to get an appointment so that you can get a diagnosis. And without a diagnosis, it's really difficult to actually move forward.
There are things that people can do as well. There are things, let's say you just want to know. Well, you can go to a clinical psychologist. Excuse me. You can go to a clinical psychologist. You just can't get any medication for it. But there are other tactics, of course, that there's lots of really good, specialists and podcasts and YouTube channels and that can sort of give you tactics for that. But the lack of focus or the ability to stay focused on a task to its end, it's pretty damning if you're trying to run a business.
Yes.
And so, if you find yourself forgetting what you were doing while you're doing it, which is what happens to me, I'll be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And I say it out loud to myself, what are you doing right now? What were you supposed to be doing? And so that might happen every now and then through perimenopause. But if that's happening several times an hour, you're not getting any shit done. Like that's, significant. And so I think that I don't make light of symptoms or anything. I know there's a lot of that content out there that's just not really me, but I am definitely a get on with it. Like find a way that works, find tactics that work for you.
Yeah.
Is it having breakfast early and having better sort of quality early in the day?
Yeah.
And I've found that breakfast and, eggs, like, because how easy a boiled egg, right?
Yes.
Because we forget to eat. Like that's one of the things that happens.
Yes, exactly. Yes. It's a constant conversation I'm having with women, particularly around intermittent fasting, because there's a lot of people that are really into that. And I'm yet to find a woman that does extremely well on intermittent fasting. And again, all the research done in men, which makes it, difficult. But it seems an attractive thing, but women really do need to eat in the morning. They really need to have breakfast. It really does set you up for a good day, a productive day. So yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because it is a big
and particularly,
topic of discussion.
I know that's good. It's sort of like, what is the easiest thing for me to eat?
Yes.
And so because I don't like cold boiled eggs. But it really, I'm one of those people that I've got a Thermomix, absolutely love it. Yeah. I can put eggs in there. I can have them when they're hot, straight out of the thing. I don't have to forget them on the stove and, whatever. Yeah. So that's one of my go-tos actually is, don't forget to eat. But if you do, there's something really easy. There's something really simple that I can grab.
Yeah.
That's been
super important.
So simple. It's so simple, and lots of water. So that's the other thing, because I forget. I had been forgetting to drink water.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
And
again,
that's
sort of super common.
Simple.
Yes. And especially as the weather gets colder, like it's, and even for me, I mean, I spend a lot of time at a desk, and I've always got my bottle of water, my glass of water. But even then I have reminders in my calendar to make sure that I've drunk a certain amount of water, because I know how important it is. And I know that I'll forget if I get really into a task and I'm in focus, it'll be really hard to remember. But things like that, your brain needs water. Your body needs water. These are some really basic tips for just, having a good day is just, eating breakfast and being hydrated. But what are some other like productivity tips that you have? For me to, generally speaking, and this could be both ADHD and menopause sort of symptom, where it's really easy to procrastinate, because if it's not interesting or inspiring or novel, then it's not even in my head to do it. It's not even in my brain. Yeah.
And so procrastination is something I talk to people about a lot, because there are just some tasks that we simply have to do for our businesses.
Yes.
And if anyone says, you just need to be more disciplined, slap yourself in the face and have a drink of water and sit back down, because that's garbage.
Yeah.
It's also just the judgiest, shittiest thing,
isn't it?
People can say. But what you can do is, for example, a part of my business is copywriting. It's not the thing that I love. It doesn't give me the energy that talking or training, educating, mentoring people does. So I like the creative bit at the beginning with the client where we're sort of thinking about the vision of what they want and da-da-da. It gets really exciting. And then they're like, yep, do that. And then the actual bit that has to be written, that's the bit I procrastinate on, which sounds ridiculous. I ruminate and it percolates a bit, and that's fine. But at some point, it's actually got to get done. Yeah. And so what I've had to do time and time again is notice when I'm really procrastinating. So there are things that happen just before that, like I don't feel like having a shower is one of them. So if I'm putting off having a shower, it's because I'm procrastinating on something else.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, hang on, I know what's happening here, young lady. Get in the shower and bloody get dressed. And then I get a bit more energy. And then the next thing I do is break the task that I don't want to do into the tiniest steps. Like open the document, open Google Drive, search for the document, find the document. Like I really get granular because as we achieve little steps, we get more momentum. So that works. Yeah. And then I also imagine, like visualize how fantastic it's going to feel to get rid of that thing that I don't want to do, because I know I'll feel good when it's done. And then I try and work out a kind of a reward, vague sort of thing at the other end, like, oh, you can listen to, a podcast, or you can write some stuff in your journal that you wanted to create this new thing for your business or whatever. And I find that catching myself in the procrastination, if I'm not being productive, and saying, what is difficult about this? Why aren't you doing it? What's stopping you from doing this thing? It's got too many steps. It's got it's going to take hours, gross.
Yeah.
And then I say, well, how can you make it easier? What's the thing that's going to be easy? How can I simplify this thing? And that's why breaking it up. And I'll go, you know what? Even if you just do these tasks, you can procrastinate on the rest until tomorrow. That's okay. Yeah. I'll let you do that. If you get to the point of, wow, I'm making great headway here, but every fiber in my being wants to stop doing this thing, then I'm like, okay, that's all right. You got quite a lot done. So because typically we can get a lot done in a short period of time. When you do get that focus, you're actually quite productive very quickly. So yeah, that's probably the process that I follow in the moment of knowing. Yeah. There's heaps more, of course, but that's probably what's been happening the most for me this week.
Yeah, awesome. And that actually reminded me of a little tip that when I worked in corporate, that we had an external trainer come in and talk about exactly this, productivity and procrastination. And one tip that I've carried with me that I really love is give yourself permission to stop after 10 minutes. So if you have a task to do, you don't want to do it, allow yourself to do it for 10 minutes only. And then if you don't want to continue doing it, you've complete permission to stop. And I find that quite useful, because you kind of think, 10 minutes, I can do something for 10 minutes and then I'm going to stop. But more often than not, once I've started, it's kind of like, actually, it's not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's not.
Yeah, it's not as bad as I was expecting.
Yeah, exactly. I think you build it up in your mind sometimes as being a bit more boring or tedious than it's actually going to be. One thing I did want to ask you, Jenny, particularly as someone that's balanced work, your own business, and being a single mum, is there such a thing as work-life balance when you're in that scenario? And how can you find it if you're solo?
It's such a good question. It's like this other judgy thing that people say, that you have to find work-life balance, or if you're feeling burnt out, it's because you have no balance. So it's still your fault.
Of course it's your fault. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, which is obviously, absolute garbage, isn't it? I think I was back then, probably when everything was at its absolute peak. So 2014 and 2018 were the two sort of main, 2018, 19, when I look back over the last decade, they're the two that really stand out as the most difficult times.
Yeah.
I think that apart from just after you get divorced when it's feral as well, but let's just all assume that we'll put that to one side. I just had to say, how do I really want this to be? What do I want this to look like? It's okay if I don't want to go on holidays with my children. If I find that really mega stressful to do by myself, I give myself permission not to be that person that pushes and pushes and pushes to do things that families with couples do.
Yeah.
Because that is going to send me over the cliff. Like literally, there's nothing worse than having three kids fight the whole time and be by yourself. And there's no joy in that experience for me whatsoever. So I remember thinking, I just remember that feeling of Friday nights when we were growing up. I don't know if you know what I mean, but there was like a relaxed kind of vibe about a Friday night.
I totally know what
Didn't
you
really
mean.
have to sit. Didn't have to sit at the table to eat together.
Yeah.
You didn't really have to have tea at a particular time. And so I started kind of trying to reinvent that vibe every night. How can this feel like a Friday night? Because I didn't want to fight them to get in the bath and the shower. I didn't want to fight over meals. I didn't want to fight over devices. So I would just say to everyone, this is what's for tea, come and help yourself. So it was almost like there was usually a bit of a smorgasbord. So I didn't even care anymore. If they want to eat, they're going to eat. Like the angst we put ourselves through for parenting if kids are hungry, they will find something to eat. We all know that now. But so I was trying to find ways to feel a bit more zen for the tasks that I found the most difficult, which were always kid related for me, 100%, and housework related and whatever. So I don't know if there is such a thing as balance, but I do think there's a way to use your brains and your skills because you want to, but also give yourself permission to not have to do that all the time, because you clearly have other responsibilities when you're a solo parent. So can you find other ways to get some peace in the parts of the day that are not as peaceful? And someone very, very wise said to me, if the chaos is not serving you anymore, then it means that you do have to put some systems in that part of the day. And I remember I said to her, what do you mean? And she said, I know that you probably don't do the dishes at night because you're knackered by then. So you've cooked everyone dinner. They've all been fighting with everything. You've shoved everyone in the shower because they've been obnoxious and they won't get in the shower. And then you're like, thank God I have the freedom to go and sit and do whatever I want. But the chaos I'd left behind me, i.e. not cleaning up the kitchen, did that serve me the next day? So when I had to get up in the morning, did the chaos, the freedom of chaos the day before, serve me in that moment? And forcing myself to say, future Jenny will be so rapt that bench is clean.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer walking into the kitchen, isn't it, when the bench is clean? Just little things like that bring a bit more peace. And I'm not saying I did it all the time, because I didn't, but I know that when I did take the effort, and literally, what does it take? 5 minutes, for God's sake. But it feels like, I have to do this extra goddamn thing because no one's helping me. And I really like that notion of, is the freedom of chaos is that serving you? Or could there be things I did each morning, a routine? Because I don't want to be a routine person. That's not my personality. But how could that serve me in little ways? And I ended up putting tubs of, what are they called? I'd pre-make chicken rolls or something. And then I'd have a tub of fruit, a tub of muesli bars. And I did not pack a lunchbox after, I don't know, maybe grade 5 or something, even maybe even a bit before that for the other two, because I was like, there's the food. I've done my bit. You pack it in a box and put it in your goddamn bag. If you forget it, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
And I think that started to be, knowing that those parts of the tedium upset me and I just really disliked it and I didn't want to resent that, I'd find ways to say, well, you can have responsibility for that. And they were all right with that.
Yeah.
But they're probably the things that pop to mind. There's no such thing as balance, but where can you build in some other senses of at least neutral, not necessarily joyful, but just peaceful? Where can you build some of that in and bookend the day a little bit so that you can really enjoy the work in the daytime?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of started making me think about having self-care, because in a way, that example you used about the kitchen and knowing that walking in the next day and having the clean kitchen would bring you joy, I guess, or would serve you. And to me, that really is a bit of a self-care ritual to do that, because you know that that's looking after future Jenny. What other sort of self-care things have you brought in to help with the chaos?
I let myself work from bed every now and then.
Oh, nice. So I've never done that. I like that.
So last week I knew that I was feeling pretty stressed about some things with one of the boys. And I thought, why don't you put a out of office thing on your email?
Yeah.
No one's going to suffer if I don't people for 3 days. Not really. And so I cancelled all my Zooms or phone calls. I didn't speak to anyone for about 3 days. Nice. Probably 2.5, actually. That's a lie. I did speak to people on Wednesday afternoon, but I worked from bed for a couple of hours in the morning. Like, just took it easy. God, I got heaps done. And I was warm and I was comfy and I got, just tasks that if I'm going to procrastinate from my desk, sometimes I'll think, actually, you don't have to be anywhere online or with other people all day. You can bloody work. You can work here all day if you want. And so they're the sort of things I think, well, what would be a nice thing? I still get productive, but let myself, be a bit of a slob. And but just say, that actually feels really relaxing and comfortable to me. So that feels good to do that. But the out of office thing was awesome. I just cancelled and said, I'll speak to you all on Thursday. Nobody's going to suffer if I'm not available for a couple of days. Yeah. But it really did make a huge difference.
Yeah. And that is great.
I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah.
Sorry. Do you know something, Susie? Sorry. One thing that I meant to say just then was the amount of people that were surprised that I did it and congratulated me.
Yeah.
Makes me realise how much we should be doing that. I know someone who has an entire week of no clients every month. They don't go on a single Zoom. I know. I'm like, oh wow, that's really brave. No, it's not. It's actually really necessary. So I'm so glad I did it, but I was also aware that people noticed and said, well done for doing it. And I'm like, wow, we're not looking after ourselves if that's a big deal that I took, you know.
Yeah. I mean, we celebrate the busyness, don't we? It's like one of the first things people will say, hey, go, oh, so busy. And it's a kind of a weird thing for someone to go, I'm not busy. It's not something that people, I guess, are attracted to in a way. It becomes quite, I don't know, there is currency in saying how busy you are, being so busy. And I think we need to celebrate more that being slow, taking some time out for self, because I think, again, as women, there's a suggestion that if we do that, then we're being selfish, and can't be selfish, my gosh, and particularly if you're a mother, can't be selfish, but I think it's necessary. It's necessary to take that some time out sometimes. And even if you don't have, if you work for like a company or something, you don't necessarily have that ability to take some time out and cancel your work and have a few days off, even if during the day you can, even if it's at lunchtime, just getting outside or doing something, not working from your desk, which a lot of people do, not being on your screen for that short period of time, something that just gives you some time to relax, regulate your nervous system, feel back into yourself, rather than be constantly on and constantly be all about everyone else. Because it is very, very depleting. You know, there's that whole, I mean, we all know that saying, you know, put your own oxygen mask on first. But I don't think that is what a lot of women do, particularly women in business. It's just like hustle.
Well, in practical terms, what does it even mean? Like those platitudes about that, they're not concrete enough for me to know what that means.
Yeah.
In actual everyday activity, what are you talking about when you say I should put my oxygen mask on first? I don't know what you mean. I think there's this sort of thing that, you know, it's mutually exclusive to take care of yourself or the kids. Yes. What a load of rubbish. They're bloody fine. They can get a drink of water. They're not hopeless. They know what they're doing. And so I'd said last Monday, I still worked as such, but I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't do had no meetings, which was just delightful. And on the Monday afternoon, after I'd finished something that I needed to do, I went back to bed. So it was about, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock or something. And I haven't had a nap. I'm a daytime napper from way back. Well, I haven't done that for a really long time. And so I went to bed and I just sort of had the blinds shut and it was nice and dark and warm. And my eldest son rang and said, I'm at the supermarket. Do you need anything for dinner? And I said, no. Like, I've cooked soup. There's somebody, they can eat whatever's out there. And he said, but what about you? Do you want some comfort food?
Oh,
he said, yeah. I was like, oh, I've done a good job there. That's great.
Yes.
But I think that there's a way to build this in that shows them a good example of, I need some self-care right now. I'm feeling a bit stressed, so I'm going to reduce my expectations and yours as well for what I'm doing in the next few days, and making that normal, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. It's quite shocking that people think, good on you for, well, what did I actually do? I just cancelled a few phone calls and a couple of Zooms and worked in Ugg boots from bed sort of thing. Like, it's not that big a deal, but it really did feel great to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's a really nice note to kind of finish our discussion today, Jenny, because I think that's a really positive way to finish, is that giving yourself permission, that looking after yourself does not mean that you're not looking after your family, and that we need to be far kinder to ourselves as women when it comes to things like this. So, Jenny, where can people find you online if they want to continue to follow your journey? And I know that you actually are launching a podcast, so do tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple of places. Please connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. So if you just search for Jenny de Lacy, you'll see me there. And you can follow my hashtag Talking Digital if you want to see the content that when I have conversations with other people, I tend to use that hashtag so we can see those little interviews and things with people. And I'm currently I have recorded, but I keep procrastinating, on the editing part of the ADHD Marketer, which is a podcast. It's a mixture of me and interviewing people, a bit like yours, where it's about finding ways to focus and getting the right things done for your business, for your marketing, for entrepreneurs who have or suspect they have ADHD. But there's lots of tips in there for everyone. So there's a mixture of different lengths of episode, and I'm a bit excited about getting it out there. And continuing some of those conversations on LinkedIn through audio events is probably how I'm going to try and build some conversations in and not just have people listening to the podcast. So
Fantastic.
yeah, that's exciting. That'll be
Awesome.
launched. Want to make sure I get that out before I go to Cairns in June.
Yeah. Good idea.
I've got a deadline.
Good idea.
Now.
Love that. And I'll pop the links to all of that in the show notes as well to make it really easy. So thanks again, Jenny, for your time today. I think there's been some absolute gold in what you've had to say today. And I'm really looking forward to broadcasting this pod. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Susie.
Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ageless and Awesome podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure you click the little plus button if you're on Apple Podcasts or the follow button if you're on Spotify so that you can get each new episode delivered to you every single week. If you like free stuff, and who doesn't, then head over to susiegarden.com and grab my 8 essential age-defying secrets every woman over 40 should know right now. Or if you'd like to continue the discussion, head over to Instagram and DM me at Susie Garden Wellness. I'd love to connect with you.